Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about three main ideas of developmental psychology. Um, that being them being behaviorism, Piaget's stages of cognitive, four stages of cognitive development, and the attachment. I'm sorry, not attachment theory, but the socio-cultural theory as pertaining to gender and sex. First up is behaviorism. In behaviorism, we basically learned that uh, we we learn through our environments, not instincts. And the I'm gonna break it down to three parts, and that's going to be classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational conditioning. Um, So first, we're going to start with classical conditioning. This was introduced by Ivan Pavlov, and basically he paired two things together until one triggers a response on its own. Um, so what he would do is, for example, is every time he would feed his dogs, he would ring a bell. And then eventually every time he would ring the bell, the dogs would just drool or get hungry just from him ringing the bell, right? So in real life, if we wanted to give a real life example, basically, it's like if every time you go to get fast food, there is a certain song plays on the radio. And after a while of doing this, whether you're going to get fast food or not, if you hear this song, you could potentially become hungry, right? So you're just kind of conditioning your mind, to associate the food with hearing the song, whether you're around food or not. Next is operant conditioning. This was introduced by B.F. Skinner. And operant conditioning is basically learning through rewards and punishments. So for instance, in real life, if a child, let's say, gets all A's on for grades, right, and um, you want to reward them, so you give them some sort of treat or something like that, or you say like, "Hey, for every A you bring in, I'm gonna pay you $100," right? It kind of teaches the kid over time, like, okay, so if I do this something good or that you deem is good, I will get this reward. But also with kids, if you, let's say, you know, I don't know, they won't do something that you want them to do, right? And you decide, okay, well, since you're not going to do this, every time you do this, I'm going to take your phone. Well, over time, they realize, like, okay, every time I don't do this, she's going to take my phone. So let me just do what mom wants me to do, right? So that is operant conditioning, learning through rewards and punishment. Lastly is observational learning. And this basically his theory was that we learn through watching others, uh, not just from our own consequences. So, meaning, you know, a son, a boy watches his dad and he picks up different things, maybe the way he talks or certain phrases that he says, or maybe the way he walks. And the same with a girl and her mom, right? Like you're just kind of picking up what's in your environment, and not just from like rewards or consequences, like or stimuli, like in the other uh, conditionings that I've talked about. Um, Next are the four stages of cognitive development by Jean Piaget. I hope I'm saying that right. So basically, from birth to 2 years old, it's called sensory motor. And basically, that just means that babies are learning through senses and movement, and they are starting to develop object permanence. So basically, if you play peekaboo with the baby and they're really shocked every time because, you completely cover your face and then you show it and they're just like, oh, like your face disappeared, right? But then once they hit about 2 years old, they start to realize that, like, yeah, you're covering your face, but you're ultimately your face is still there. Like you're behind the face, right? You're not completely gone. In pre-operational stages, which is from ages 2 to 7, um, kids start to use language and imagination, but they also think egocentrically. So now, let's say the toddler is covering his own face, his own eyes, and he thinks, or the toddler thinks, that because um, they assume that if like they can't see you, you also can't see them, right? Um, and then from ages 7 to 11, this is called concrete operational stage. And that's where kids can grasp conversation. I mean, not conversation, but conservation. I'm sorry. Um, so basically, that's understanding that quantity is the same, even though uh, it looks different. So, for example, if I have two cups, one short and wide, one's tall, but I pour the same amount of liquid into both, um, the child is going to think that, um, well, a 5 year old will think that like the tall cup will have more, right? But let's say by 8 years old, the child will understand that like I've poured the same amount of substance in those cups. It's just that they look different, but it's still the same amount, right? Lastly is formal operational stage, which is for ages 12 and up. And basically, it's when a teenager can reason through situations or basically have abstract hypothetical thinking. An example of this is a teenager trying to weigh the pros and cons, like, okay, like I have a test coming up, but if I skip studying, what would happen to my grade? And is it worth it? Right? Just weighing the pros and cons of like what could happen if they didn't study and what it will cost them. Um, last but all the way last but not least is the socio-cultural um, theory of gender. And what this basically talks about is that gender isn't something we're just born understanding. It's something that's shaped by like our culture, or I mean our cultural backgrounds, our environment, and the people around us. um, so basically it just it basically touches on the fact that from the moment kids are born, we're sent messages, be it our uh, what we watch, our parents, the toys that we're given, even the language that's used, right? So, when you have a baby, well, when you're young, there's the whole thing of like girls like pink, boys like blue, girls like dolls, boys like toy trucks, right? And so you're already kind of being shaped without even realizing your gender. You're already kind of shaping your gender identity without even realizing it, or like intentionally being taught your gender. Another way that kids kind of learn their gender identity is by like, um, you know, it could be TV shows that you're watching or things that you see your parents do. Like, if you watch a TV show and the women in the show are always caretakers, but then the men in the show are always like providers and protectors, then without you realizing it, you start to associate, oh, okay, so women are caretakers, men are supposed to like provide and, protect. And this becomes normal, normalized to you, or you think that this is the way men and women are supposed to act or what they're supposed to do, right? So, just an example from my culture, we are uh, from the West Indian culture. And in our household, growing up, especially as the oldest, I learned at a young age that like the women in our households were caretakers. We learned to cook, clean, fix tea, watch the kids. If you have siblings or whatever, you took care of them. Um, if your dad was getting ready for work the night before, you might, iron his shirt or something like that. Um, and with the male siblings in the house, they learn to, be handy, fix on things. They learned a little bit of cooking, but you know, the women mostly did that. They just kind of learned a little bit to kind of like fend for themselves as they got older. Um, so by just kind of seeing this or being shown this, like I learned over time, like, oh, okay, so women cook, clean, and men are supposed to provide and protect, whether that's true or not. But just within the household, that's just kind of what I saw and kind of took in and normalized it. So basically, in a nutshell, social cultural theory basically just highlights that the gender norms aren't universal, right? Like, um, what may be acceptable in my culture may not be acceptable in someone else's culture. Meaning that, you know, uh, a girl um, going out to be a doctor or something, right? May not be okay in someone else's culture or someone else's environment. Like in someone else's culture, women are could only be there to cook, clean, and just take care of the house while the men goes out to work. So it really just depends on your environment and your culture. And it also shows that gender roles are learned from society, not hardwired from birth. Um, and that is the end of my lecture. And basically, these are the three ways psychologists explain how we grow, learn, and understand ourselves. Thank you for watching.